Okay, there we go. The recording has started. Hello, everybody. Welcome. No matter your time zone, I'm very excited that you're here. We are NIU STEAM. I am going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can all be on the same page here. And I got a little ahead of myself when I clicked the screen before I got there. So we are NIU STEAM. We are a facet of Northern Illinois University. And just a little bit about each one of us here, the three presenters that you have in the room with you. My name is Jess. I am a veteran teacher. I've been teaching for a lot of years, both in and out of schools. And I have experience generating programs, kindergarten through college, with NASA, National Park Service, and working with PBS. And so I'll kick it off to my other two presenters as well.
I will jump in. So my name is Dr. Kristin Brynteson. I am the director of NIU STEAM. I've been in this role for over 5 years now, but I've been with NIU for 15. I started my career in engineering and worked as a manufacturing engineer before I switched into education over 25 years ago, and I've been working with teachers and students ever since. So very excited. This is a fun team and a fun topic. Chrissy, go ahead.
I'm Chrissy Swartz. I am an instructor here with NIU STEAM. I kind of wandered into teaching. I'm a teacher for 10 years now, 6 through 12. And I kind of specialized in making sure that I taught science, but I also specialized in IEPs and 504s and things like that to try to differentiate for everybody. So I've been in STEAM for 2 years now.
And we are here to present to you the FoodMaster curriculum. So one of the big things that we always like to do at STEAM is we are big on making sure that when we explore a topic and we go over a topic, we actually encourage our participants to learn it as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we have an activity that we are going to open up and have everybody kind of look at and participate in, because this is more than just a sit and get session. We want you to be a part of what we do. So one of the things that FoodMaster does is it has these wonderful activities that you can utilize in your space in a variety of ways. This one specifically is called Menu Math. And Menu Math is a way for us to incorporate math into something that we would normally do that is actually something kids would be excited about. So for this specific example, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 questions on the screen. Question number 1 said, if two friends shared a baked mac and cheese and a classic burger with cheese, an order of onion rings, split the cost, how much would they have to pay? And the goal is that students would then use the map to use the menu. I have been staring at curricular maps all day, if you couldn't tell. Use the menu to help kind of identify how much it would cost and see if they could figure out how much it would be to split the bill. So let's take a moment and let's do that. And I am going to mute myself and give you a second. Select one of those 4 questions and see if you can come up with an answer for that. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and give us a minute. I took the easy question and went with question number 3 and looked at how much it would cost to order 3 fried chicken slider combo meals. That one took me to the today only special. That was 3 fried chicken sliders for $6.25, and making them combos adds fries and a soda for an additional $5. So each meal would be $11.25 in that situation. And if I multiply that times 3, hopefully my math is correct, and I get $33.75. If my math isn't correct, you can tell me. I'm okay with that. But did anybody try any of the other questions and get an answer for those? Everybody's like, Jess, it's too early in the morning for math. And that's understandable too.
I tried number 1, but I didn't get all the way to the end of it. I got I think it's 1825 divided by 2. I think, but I could have gotten something wrong there.
Liz is agreeing with you. So I'm going to go with Liz agreeing with you and say that you guys are correct in this statement. And then dividing it by 2, I mean, you said 18.25?
Yeah, we're gonna have to split pennies over here.
I know, somebody's going to have to pay an extra penny. The audacity. I'll take the penny for you. And then these questions, this is just one small example of an opportunity that is a larger activity. And they have things like plan family menus. How much would it cost if your family went out to eat? Because that's a really big one to consider as we start looking at costs changing and students are becoming more aware of what things cost. It's important for them to understand how we kind of calculate that and how families maybe calculate their meal plans. So is this something that you could do with a group of students? Is it something that you could see a group of students participating in? Or are there extensions you could create? I am an interactive session person and it feels like we're not in an interactive session, and that's okay.
I can talk to that a little bit. We in our summer program we do pizza gardens, and so food justice and nutrition are a big piece of that. And so as we go towards doing like visual essays and things like that for the kids, then talking about costs like this will be helpful. We haven't necessarily done it in this method, but I can see it right away working out for us.
I think pizza gardens are a fabulous activity and 100% tying right into this. And what a fun way to do it. Do they actually get to make pizzas at the end?
We do. We did no cooked pizza sauce, and we had tomatoes, peppers, and basil. And if you haven't had lemon lime basil, get you some lemon lime basil. But yeah, so the kids, and they're just excited to get started. We're just getting started for this summer right now. So
that is excellent. And I am sure one of our other educators, Chrissy, will tell you all about our gardens too, if you ask her, because we've got some over here as well. We love that. So is this considered STEAM? In the end, yes, these activities are all considered STEAM. STEAM is more than just what we consider of science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And it encompasses a real world, authentic experience. So we're going to talk about what STEAM is. I'm going to turn it to Chrissy and Kristin to go over FoodMaster and how we kind of utilize it in our spaces, and in the hopes that potentially you can find uses for it in your spaces as well. So first off, how many people are already participating in STEAM? You can just put a little heart on. I see a hand. If you put a little heart, like, yes, we're doing STEAM, that's fine too. A couple of people. Okay, good. Oh, see, yay. The people who don't want to be on camera are like me. That's totally fine too. I love it. Good, good. I think that if we're already doing STEAM, this is going to be a perfect session for you to kind of integrate in. And so one of the big things for us is making sure that our processes, oh my gosh, you can see the red glare on my face. Never doing a red slide again. One of the things that we really think is important is making sure that our processes are sustainable, that it is something that is repeatable and students can participate in year after year. And it's not a deep dive off the deep end where you're doing these massive experiments and all of these wonderful things are coming together, and you see it like you see in the big science shows. This is something that a person can step right into. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brynteson, who's kind of created most of our STEAM processes, and let her go from here.
Thanks, Jess. So we've heard from several of you who are doing STEAM, who are looking at what STEAM looks like. One of the things that we like to do, because STEAM is such a broad term, is how are we defining STEAM? So either put in the chat or unmute. What are some of the ways you are incorporating STEAM? What does STEAM look like to you? Especially in this informal spaces that we're in. What does STEAM look like? You can unmute, jump in, type in the chat.
I work in early childhood, 0 to 8, mostly infants and toddlers. And so STEAM is everything that we do, because eating is an experience with sensory play. It builds vocabulary. We paint, we make our own Play-Doh. So instead of using menu math, we're doing recipe math. You know, kids count how many cups of flour. So everything we do is STEAM based, from, you know, putting cars down paper towel tubes and seeing how fast they can go based on the angle. So we do everything. Everything we do is STEAM.
You know, Tracy, I love that you say that. As we work with some, like, we've done trainings where you've got the preschool all the way through the high school teachers in the room. And when we start asking these questions, that's one of the first things the preschool and the kinder teachers say is like, but this is what we do. This is,
Problem is they don't know they're doing it.
yeah.
So in so many centers, so I do a workshop called Buzzword Bingo, and it's a PD workshop, and you know, the teachers don't understand that paper towel tube with the car is physics. It, you know, it's propulsion. It's all of this stuff. It goes faster when you hold it at a different angle. And so the workshop is basically playing the interpreter from play-based to STEAM language. And then they're like, oh, and you see them kind of straighten up better. Like, you
Yeah.
are doing so much more complex. And my kids are older now, but they will tell you that they have ruined every chemistry teacher's oobleck workshop, because as soon as they walk in the classroom for this really cool day of suspension and non-Newtonian fluids and all that stuff, and they're like, oh, we're making oobleck today? And they're like, you work in like early childhood, don't you? Like, all those, we ruin it for them. But we don't have to wait till junior year of high school to learn this stuff. We've been doing
Right.
it since we're 2.
Absolutely. Like, we're naturally born curious beings that are trying to discover the world around them. And that's really what this looks like. I love some of the comments here in the chat. City build, where kids design the city of the future. Inquiry activities, design challenges, engineering applications to the real world. I love that. One of the biggest challenges we've had when we really started identifying and focus, how do you, what does it look like? How do we move beyond science, technology, engineering, art, and math and get to the core of what is it we're trying to do with students? And so this statement here kind of encapsulates it in a fairly simplistic form. And some of the key pieces of that is, like, we're using core content. Tracy, just as you said, there's physics, there's math connected, it's very clear, but we're doing the way students can ask questions, have conversations, think critically, be creative, and taking the knowledge that they have and applying that in meaningful and authentic ways around solving and just kind of navigating through life. So kind of going back to your statement, Tracy, just this idea of naturally we are doing STEAM. So how do we incorporate this in a very intentional way? Jessica, you can go ahead and advance the slides for me. So one of the things that we have looked at that we're gonna just touch on is, when you look at the research of the way STEAM and STEM and science and math education, what works, we've combed through that and identified 6 core catalysts that we feel are evident in a lot of high quality STEAM programming. And many of these alone, we've probably all talked about. You've probably done project-based and problem-based learning. You do address the STEAM concepts and content areas. Essential employability skills, this is going to be something that's probably, the language is a little more Illinois formal K-12 speak, but for everybody else, these are the 21st century skills. These are the soft skills. These are the skills that have been identified by industry as, no matter what field you go into, these are the skills that are going to be valuable in the workforce. So from an Illinois standpoint, there's 10 essential employability competencies, but it is what you would expect: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, planning and organization. So that's, how do you weave those into these experiences? Growth and persistence, we all taught growth mindset. That has been kind of at the core, the learning through failure, the how do you do iterative based activities where students have the ability to try, revise, try again. That's all interconnected. We also pull very closely into career connections. So especially in those informal spaces, how are we bringing in our community partners, our industry partners to take what we're doing, the city building? How do we bring in city planners? How do we bring in our police force? How do we bring in others that make a city run and take that activity and connect it to career paths? So students, even at the preschool level, are starting to see that all of this is interconnected. And then finally, this one might be a little different language. It's some very, we talk a lot about interdisciplinary. Transdisciplinary approach is kind of on that far end of the continuum, where the content you're hitting is driven by the questions and the activities the students are interacting with. So it really is, how do all of these content areas interconnect? How are they all needed to either solve the problem, address the challenge? And so it isn't necessarily designing, we're going to do an activity that hits ELA and math. It's, we're going to design an activity that's addressing this problem. And to do that successfully, here's the different content areas our students might be hitting on. Again, really a great way to look at things in an informal learning space, because that's what we do. So much of this is really looking at what are the successful things that happen in those informal spaces, and how do we put names to it and say, this is intentional and this is what this looks like. I'm watching the chat here and just seeing if there's any questions. Let me know, stop me if you need anything. Feel free to come off mic if you want to talk about anything or have questions too. A little bit more about NIU STEAM, and then we're going to dig into FoodMaster, because the FoodMaster curriculum it was developed a lot outside of this framework, but you'll see it has a lot of very key connections. And so going back to what is it we're trying to do? What learning environment are we trying to set up with our students? We know that it is about being active. It's about the students learning through doing, not learning through sitting and getting. They are digging in, they're trying, they're applying, they're asking questions. It's about being active. We've also, as we've been working with teachers in both settings, informal and formal, what we've heard over the years is that's great, but my students they don't know how to ask good questions, or they're not good collaborators yet. And so through our experience over the last 10 years or so, we've identified what we're calling the STEAM essentials. We named it that before the essential employability skills came out. So no confusion there at all. But these ideas, these building blocks, these basic skills, what are we trying to build in our students? And so when you look at these are some of the things that we're skill building. So no matter what career they go into, no matter what content area they're looking at, there are ways we can practice and build these skills. Asking questions, taking the kids out for a walk, finding what questions do they come up with, talking about, are these questions we can investigate? Are these yes and no questions? How does questioning drive our interactions with the world? How are we building collaboration skills? Again, we all know that sometimes kids and adults are not always the most natural collaborators. So how are we getting time to practice and reflect on that? Data collection has been one of those things that is becoming a core skill in just careers of the future. Being able to understand, think, and collect from a data perspective has been very valuable. So what are ways we're giving students the opportunity to practice that? The other ones, effective feedback, doing observations, making reasoning, and then understanding how to go through that design cycle are all skills that we can build. And so one of the things we try to do as we work with educators is, what are ways you're intentionally incorporating these into the activities you do with the students? So I want to pause there and go, think about some of the activities you're doing. Whether it's the pizza garden, the building activity, the sending cars through tubes, Are there any of these STEAM essentials that you're either building now or with a tweak in your activity, could you use that as a skill building activity? Who wants to share, think, drop it in the chat?
I can share on the city build one. We do, it's super fun. There's like 9 different zones of the city, and kids are assigned kind of in little groups to each different zone. So like we have like a transportation zone or a business zone. And it's just fun to see them collaborate and like get their wheels turning about what it could look like. And then I think a lot of times, especially with the elementary school kids, they kind of all go off in different directions. And so we have to try to kind of help them like, okay, love all of these ideas, but they all have to fit within your zone. So like, how are we doing that? How can we kind of collaborate in this person's idea and this person's idea and make them one? So I always just love seeing that.
And I like what you've said about giving them time to reflect and debrief on the collaboration. How did this work? How did we share skills? That's a great example. One other example. Who else wants to share one? Or an area you'd want to do more in. Go ahead, Tracy. I saw you just come off mute.
We do the evolving stages of block play a lot. So starting from infant all the way up to school age and beyond. You know, and there's like 7 specific stages that as soon as an educator sees it, they're like, oh my God, that's so true. Because you know that infant just walks around carrying one, and then they'll make a bridge by the age of 3, and then they start planning, and so you see the development, and then they take it and run with it once they get to the real school age years. So there's that, and then we also like to tie things together, because just like social emotional learning, STEAM should not be a separate category. So we'll
yes.
read the 3 Little Pigs, and then I'll give them a bunch of straw and a bunch of popsicle sticks and a bunch of Legos and have them build houses themselves and figure out what material is strongest, what walls stand up, what shape is the ceiling, you know, that kind of stuff. And so you tie it all together, and then we go outside and we act it out, and I'm the wolf and I chase them around. So we just
fantastic.
all around with one book.
Well, and I love that you're bringing the books into it, because as you said, STEAM is integrated. And this idea of how do we pull in books can be a great catalyst for STEAM learning. And since we're going to be talking food, there's a new book called Umami. And I'm trying to remember who the author is, but it's about a penguin who gets tired of eating fish all the time because he doesn't really like fish. And so he starts traveling the world and trying new foods. And so how can some of these books we're already reading with our students then launch us into STEAM exploration? It's all connected. And that's kind of one of the big takeaways today is STEAM is connected to everything. It's a part of everything, and there's easy ways to step into that. But it's a fun book, and the illustrations are adorable. Adorable. All right, Jess, go ahead. All right, FoodMaster. I'm going to give you a really quick overview of FoodMaster, and then I'm going to toss it over to Chrissy, because Chrissy has been using FoodMaster in our after-school program here on campus with our middle school students, and we're doing it a little bit with some of our other grades as well. So FoodMaster is free curriculum that was created through support from the Science Education Partnership Award as part of NIH. So it was created over, I think it's been about 20 some years that this curriculum has been in various stages of development process. So it's been out there for a while. It is housed now at NIU, but it's because the faculty member that had the grant is now at NIU. So we get to explore and expand it. Go ahead, Jess, to the next slide. So what FoodMaster is it's a series of programs and books and activity guides that start at grade 3 and go all the way up to higher ed. And so you can see just a little taste here of some taste. It's going to be filled with food puns. Sorry, everyone. You have a taste here of a recipe for a wonderful after school and informal program. But all of these books are a way to teach science and math using food as the mechanism. So kind of keep that in mind. This is really geared towards not necessarily food science, although that's a piece of it, but it's really about building those math and science skills. Go ahead, Jess, to the next one. So there is a link to the FoodMaster curriculum. As we said, it is free to download, and you'll see all the various grade levels and books. Over the years, this has been developed by teams of licensed educators working with nutrition and dietetics experts, working with food science experts, all to create hands-on, interactive math and science units that can be integrated in a variety of different ways. There really isn't a lockstep way to follow this. We pull from different pieces. We kind of use different variations of it, but it is all teacher tested. It's been implemented in a variety of formats, from formal K-12 settings all the way to informal spaces, to push-in programs. We've even developed summer camps where this is at the core. So it's a very versatile program that is also anchored in the research of what engages students in science and math learning. All right, next slide. So why food? I don't know, how many of you are also already using food, and what have you seen in how food engages students?
We use food, and of course kids like to eat, but we're very careful with food because we serve a population that has a lot of food insecurity, so we don't play with food, or if we're playing with food, you can still eat it at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't make potato clocks and such, but anything that involves eating, the kids are all about.
That's awesome, and you've raised a really, really good point. When you look at the FoodMaster curriculum, since it was co-designed with the dietetics and nutrition folks, it is about understanding food as fuel, but you do want to be mindful of the audience and what is their access to food, and how are we incorporating that. Great points. Anyone else using food, and how are you using it?
We do, when I was in the classroom with toddlers, we did weekly cooking with toddlers. If they make it, they will try it. So, green eggs and ham, we tie it to literacy again. We did, my staff was, I had 3 Mexican women in the classroom with me, and they brought in masa and a tortilla press, and we made our own tortillas. And then we read books about making tamales during the holidays, and we made tamales with toddlers. And then we get to eat them for snack. We did vegetable soup, and then at the very end, you add a package of, ramen noodles, a square of ramen noodles, and we had an electric fry pan, a burner, and a slow cooker in the classroom. And so everything was done in the classroom, up on the counter. It was like a cooking show. And then at the end, we made a parent gift as a cookbook of everything we had made during the year. And then we had the kids write the recipes. So, to make mac and cheese, you open the box and you put it in the microwave, and like their description of how we cook things was hilarious. But then we also included the actual recipes of what we made. And so it was wildly popular.
Great example of transdisciplinary approach, because not only are you doing the ELA, you've got the food, it's engaging, you've got some computational thinking in there with the processes of building the recipes and getting kids to think procedurally. That's what I hope, again, you take away from this. This is very fun and a creative way to think about engaging students in learning. And you said, food is familiar. It has some great cultural ties. You can bring in some of the cultural connections and celebrate the cultural foods. We can have great conversations around local foods versus foods that might be grown in other regions. So it's a wonderful, motivating tool, but you're also, as both Liz and Tracy have pointed out, you're building life skills through the coaching and the raising the food literacy of the students and the families through these kinds of activities. I love what just popped in the chat, Tracy. The food is a love language for many. Absolutely. I don't get to go into the after school classroom often, but when I do pop in, that's usually one of the first things I ask me. Did you bring food? It's like, okay. It's like, good to see you too. But no, it's a love language. It is a great way to show that that we're caring about their well-being and teaching them healthy patterns.
Well, and so many schools don't allow home cooked items anymore for allergy reasons and all that stuff. But in the Chicago public schools, my daughter's a teacher and it's Teacher Appreciation Week. And she said the parents that are bringing food for staff, not for the kids to eat, but these are tier 1 schools. They're poverty-ridden communities. But boy, they made, they brought in tamales or they baked conchas and they brought it for the staff to show their appreciation. That's how they show their love and appreciation. And, my daughter's like, Mom, I've never had food this good before. It's everything, right? And so when we can encourage that and have people share their culture or share their, especially word and great vocabulary builders like umami.
Yep.
Right? I mean, so everything ties in.
Great points, Tracy. Okay, I know you want to hear what this looks like in action. I'm going to send this over to Chrissy, and she can talk a little bit about the math and science skills connection and what this has looked like in practice at NIU.
Chrissy, you're muted.
You're muted.
I double clicked. I'm going back to COVID days. So we have a after school program that currently services middle school students that live in the community. And we're also bridging out to high school and elementary school. So a lot of what we've done with FoodMaster has taken place in the middle school. And we all know that teaching is 50% sleight of hand, right? As Kristin said earlier, students learn better when they're doing and participating far more than when we open up their brains and just dump in facts and figures. So embedding math and science into real world applications helps them internalize the lesson so much more efficiently and effectively. And kind of what Kristin said earlier about when she walks into our classroom, how many times have you had kids walk into your classroom or you see them in the hall or outside and they ask about food or snacks or something in that frame of conversation? So if we harness their joy of snacks and food and all that, we can kind of swaggle in a little math and science. And it's pretty easy to do with cooking because cooking is pretty much all math and science if you think about it. It also acts as a catalyst for nutrition and food equity conversations. Sometimes those can be difficult conversations to have, and this kind of opens a door where you're already immersed. So talking to them about those topics is a little bit easier. And the research is showing that the level of disease and illness in children has changed significantly in recent decades because there's a dietary shift away from nutritionally dense foods, more towards the ultra processed and high calorie and low nutrient options. So this allows them to not only practice those core science and math and engineering skills, because we will bring in entrepreneurship, but it also helps them understand that nutritionally dense foods are going to help them live more productive, longer lives, because we're seeing an increase in illness that was once primarily associated with adulthood. They're now showing up in children. So this kind of gives us a conduit to talk about a bunch of different things that are important to them and their families, and not just sit them in science and math classrooms and have them do those kind of like on islands away from being able to incorporate it into their everyday lives. Go ahead, Jess. Something else that we try really hard to do within our program is more like generational education. Not only do we work with the students for STEAM content and skills, but we also work with families and community members. We have a special like little social engagement kind of day each week to bring in family members and bring in members of the community so that we can take what the students know and what the students have learned and showcase them for the kid or for the families. And I don't know how much you guys have experienced this, but kids like to parrot. So what they've heard on an internet from their favorite influencer or heard from their parents, they like to parrot back at us. So this kind of helps us as well as if we educate them in the STEAM curriculum and in the industry standards and in food, they can bring that home and also teach their parents and their loved ones what they learned through the STEAM process and through FoodMaster. Go ahead, Jess. This is a sample page out of the workbooks. These are also downloadable free from the FoodMaster website that we shared the link for earlier. The way that we've used this is I don't necessarily give them the workbook. What we've done is I've gone through and highlighted some of the essential workplace skills, the math skills, the science skills that each unit is trying to harness. And we've had GAs that have worked with dietetics. We've got GAs that work with kinetic wellness who like to cook as well. So this is a way that we could get college students involved in with the middle school students. So you've got that peer-to-peer mentoring almost, because they're not that much older than the kids that we've got in class. And they've actually come up with recipes that embed the lessons from each of the workbooks. So the cool thing about FoodMaster is that it is so very integratable into what you're doing. You can open the book up and you can follow the workbook word for word. You can grab pieces and parts. They've got activities and labs in there as well that you can throw out to your students. And then you could go through and also just highlight the things that you want your students to look at or talk about or work through, so that you've got the ability to, just like I said before, use this as a conduit to highlight the things that you're looking for your students to take away with. Go ahead. So this is another activity. One of the things that also comes along with FoodMaster is you get the workbooks that are in grade bands, but you also get these things called fact cards. And on each fact card, there's a front and a back to them. And the activity that Jess had you do in the beginning was part of a fact card, and this is as well. So not only do you have to worry about, or not only do you have the workbooks that you could work through, but you've got a pack of these cards that you can also work through with the students. So we're going to have you work through another activity. I really like this activity because I think that sometimes students think that there's a magical fairy that flies around and waves their wand and look, we've got food in the fridge and food in the pantry. Or like they like to tell me that I've got a full-time adult job, so of course I can take them to the vending machine. So what this cost analysis card does is it allows them to kind of visualize how much it actually costs to put together a meal. We also like to use this to show them the difference between going out and buying a meal at McDonald's versus cooking that same meal at home. So what we're going to have you do is you are going to create a shopping list of items and you're going to include their prices. So think about the last time you went to the grocery store. And you want to go ahead and make a complete meal, and each serving size has to be under $5. So you're going to create a meal. You're going to put together your shopping list. You're going to think about how much it is that you paid for those items the last time you bought them. You want to make sure that each serving that you're making from that meal, from that recipe, is under $5. So we're going to give you a couple minutes to do this. Jess, don't cheat. Put it back. all the items that are in your recipe. List them out and go ahead and try to remember how much you paid for them last time you bought them. And then we'll go ahead and look at the price list to see how close you got. When I've done this with kids, they've been way off in both directions.
And with practice, you can be the best for the Price is Right game if you ever get on it. So this is also practicing your game skills.
All right, a couple more seconds. One of the things that this does as you are working out your list is it also teaches kids how to figure out unit pricing from whole item pricing. The last time I went to Costco with my dad, it took us 2.5 hours to get through because he was walking through with his calculator to figure out if he really was getting a better deal buying in bulk versus shopping at Jewel. So this practices the math skills of being able to divide out that unit price while also gaining the life skill of being able to be able to budget out a meal. All right, Jess, if you could flip the slide for me, please. So we just went through a couple of items that people tend to put on their lists when we do this activity with the actual price per unit to see how close you were. So go ahead and look at this and see if you can compare the prices that you've got on your list versus the prices on this price per unit. And I actually assembled this list towards the end of the summer, and some of the prices have changed and some of them haven't. And this is without your sales or your coupons, your virtual coupons. All right, Jess, go ahead and flip the slide for me, please. All right, so how many of you were able to create a meal where it was $5 per serving size? Were we successful?
I struggled. I kept thinking of like whole meat, and then I was like, no, that's so expensive. Like chicken breast has gotten better, but it was a struggle.
Yes. All right, who else? One other person. In the chat, if you don't want to click on.
I did sloppy joes, homemade air fryer fries and salad for 4, and it was $4.75 a person.
And that was a good meal too. It wasn't just pasta with some butter. That's awesome. I did lentil soup with
I'm sorry.
cornbread. Lentil soup with cornbread and just like individual veggies. One onion's like 69 cents, and you can chop it up, and it's an easy way to throw in extra food and nutrition without spending a lot.
Absolutely. And adding protein sources like Greek yogurt and things like that also tend to bulk up your recipes for a couple of dollars on the side. Did you, when you were making your estimations, when you were doing it from memory versus that list, were they pretty on par? Oh, we got $3.44 for spaghetti. That'll go a long way too. Sometimes students don't necessarily get where prices are sitting in the supermarket. So this is a great way when they're like, well, you have an adult job. I don't have a job. You can go buy me this. This gives them the idea. Where else could you use this, or how else could you use this in your classroom other than the obvious way that we just used it now?
I think that the process from the beginning of Liz, your pizza gardens, and talking about, you know, those cost analysis, if you were to actually sell those pizzas or that homemade sauce, what could you charge for it? If we look at national grocery prices, how could you maybe make this into a business? And giving kids that business savvy would be a really cool way to support that. Or salsa. I saw somebody else with a salsa garden too.
And that's a good point, because we this year we were given, we have a edible campus group out here that work really hard to do boxes they have the raised produce boxes throughout campus so that students can break away, the college students can break away a little bit from just eating dining hall meals. They can create their own meals using fresh produce and herbs. We also have a community garden that donates to a couple of the food pantries in the area as well. And so they gave us 26 raised boxes for us to be able to implement nutrition into our STEAM stories and things like that. And we have FoodMaster Fridays, which is a club. We have social engagement twice a week. And then we've got STEAM content twice a week. And then that Friday, we kind of leave open for clubs that the kids want to participate in. And one of the really popular ones is FoodMaster Friday. So what we want to try to do is integrate, and, you know, you guys talked about the pizza gardens. Jess mentioned the salsa gardens. We've got a hamburger garden that the kids planned out to kind of implement some of the toppings that you put on a hamburger in the garden. And they also implemented herbs that you might use when you were mixing the ground beef and things like that. So this kind of helps them with meal planning. This helps them with understanding where food actually comes from. It doesn't just grow in the styrofoam containers or the cans that you find in the store. So it gets them engaged. We've got a Adopt a Barb Box program where we've had the families of our Barb students adopt a box. And in the very beginning, they were asked, are there vegetables and fruits that you eat on a regular basis? Do you have any cultural foods? We have a student from Ghana who has a hard time finding some of the things that he remembers from back home. So his garden has a Ghana theme to it, where we are going to grow okra and things like that so that he can have a taste of home. So there's different things that you can do with these gardens. We took the gardens and we implemented them in FoodMaster Friday, or we're working on that right now. So it's a cultural thing. It's a conversational piece. It's helping to boost those math and science goals. But as we said before, like, food is a great vehicle to do that. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, sorry.
I'm going to jump in with another. Grow this from an extension standpoint and pulling in nutritional analysis. So you've created a meal, you have your price, then what's the nutritional data, and start having the because one of the assumptions and the misconceptions we have is that it's expensive to eat healthy. And so making that connection of, okay, let's now plan out some meals with that same price point of processed food versus fresh food. And as Jess said, like, okay, that one onion for 69 cents, but it makes how many servings versus I'm going to buy a $3 package of something that's already pre-made. So pulling in the nutritional analysis and starting to have the conversations of processed food versus unprocessed food, locally grown food, or food you grew yourself versus food you bought at the store, kind of, again, takes this as a jumping off point to expand it.
And that's something thank you for bringing that up, because that's something that we have done with them, where we've gotten things from the store, or we've made we've made bread that has, it's from a local area that they still grind the wheat. Having them taste bread that comes from there and having them taste bread that comes from like a McDonald's bun or even a supermarket piece of white bread, just to show them the difference between the flavor in processed foods and foods that are grown whole. So
if anyone's
Okay.
got a homemade taki recipe that we can show the kids is something better than a taki.
grandma's cookies.
One
All right,
thing
go
we
ahead.
do too, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
One thing we do is, like I said before, we have an under-resourced population that we serve. And so when we look at these types of things, we also have to figure out, do you actually have a stove at home? Do you have a fridge? Do you cook in a microwave? In where we serve, is food desert, of course. So if you're going to the local store, how do you find something good to eat? So it gets kind of deep sometimes.
And that's a good skill too, because a lot of our students, they've got parents that are still working when they get home from school or from Barb City, and they have littles that they need to feed while they're waiting for their parents to get home. So if there's danger in using a stove, or if they don't have a stove, using things that they've learned through FoodMaster to be able to make those snacks or whatever for their siblings and for themselves before their parents get home. Any way else that you could use this in your classroom or with your student population?
I'm always just curious to see how much it costs to garden versus how much it costs to get produce. Like I feel like there's some produce that's like so worth it. And then some produce you're like, okay, I got 4 peppers after 8 months of really hard work. So I'm just like, I always find it so interesting to like see what has the highest yield of things that you can grow, what takes the most or less time, and those kinds of things too.
Teaching return on investment. One thing cool too that just made me think of is that the public library here in DeKalb has a seed bank. So you can go to the library and you can access seeds versus going to the store. If you don't have a Home Depot or a Lowe's or something around you that actually sells the seeds, that's something that you could start with community engagement as well. Once you've gone through and grown the garden for the first time, you can have the kids at the end of the season pull seeds and donate them to the library. So now you're creating a seed bank as well. And that allows them to understand social engagement and community engagement and empathy, where they're sharing their harvest or the fruits of their harvest with the community as well. If you're in a food desert or there's pockets where it is that people can't access food where they want to grow it themselves.
And Chrissy, I'm gonna build on that. I know one of the things we have an organization in our area called Rooted for Good, and they run a lot of the community gardens. And one of the things that they have mentioned before is that they can plant the gardens in the community and they can manage the gardens. But if the community members aren't picking them and knowing how to use them, then that food tends to just go to seed, and the effort isn't as effective. And so one of the ways, like getting the kids in the gardens, helping them see what they can do with that pepper, that is also helping some of those partner organizations that are addressing the food scarcity issues in those communities. Or it could be a catalyst that the kids could start looking for, who could we talk to about setting up a community garden in our neighborhoods? Or what are ways that we can come together to address the lack of fresh food in our neighborhoods and in our community? What could we do? So it's empowering. It's helping to address this issue that students are looking at these future problems and go, I'm powerless, I can't do anything. But we're showing them they have the power to address some of these things now and to be the change agents in their community, while they're also building those career skills and those workforce skills for the future.
All right, Jess, could you? Oh, so Liz said, yeah, the food bank also gives out vegetable plants. So that's awesome. All right, ways to use FoodMaster. We kind of all talked about this, but formally you can use them in your classrooms as lessons that or curriculum that have been formally kind of conjured. FoodMaster Fridays, project learning. This is great for problem-based learning, having them become entrepreneurs. We've talked about kind of doing, food trucks are super popular by us. We have Food Truck Wednesday. But having them kind of set up their own food trucks and their own meal plans and things like that. And how are they going to price, what it is they're selling and things like that. So giving them open-ended projects to kind of figure out on their own using FoodMaster is something that works really well. Informal after-school programs. We talked all about how it is that we use it in our after-school program. Setting up curated, one thing that we're working on here as a campus is that they're going to turn some field land that is just grass and not really doing anything, but I mean, it's a green space, so that's important, but they're talking about turning it into more of a prairie experience where they're going to have like little curated information so that people in the area don't have to worry about trying to find a forest preserve or something that they might not be able to get to. They've got this experience right on campus. So having the kids kind of set up little curated 3D print designs and things like that, so that when people are coming to pick the vegetables, maybe they're learning on top of actually picking the vegetables. And then we also have STEM events. We have teen cafes and we have STEM cafes, where the STEM cafes are for adults in the community, talking about different STEAM topics. And then in the teen cafes, we do the same thing, but it's geared towards the students. And we've done events where we've talked about canning and dehydrating and things like that, so that, you can talk about waste, where waste isn't just, we're buying too much or we're throwing away too much, but also if you're growing things that don't have a place to go with it, that's a problem too. So, and the parents and the students were super interested in the canning. And we've just talked about, we're trying to bring, at the end of the summer, beginning of the school year, instead of having an ice cream social, we're talking about having like a garden social where parents can come with their kids and either pick vegetables or share recipe ideas and things like that. Because when we talk about farmers markets and we talk about community farming and urban gardens and things like that, one of the great vehicles that it also provides is a place for people to gather and talk and have a sense of community. And one of the big things that is coming out of food systems and things right now is, we talk about how sustainable are our plants and how sustainable are our fields, but also how sustainable are our communities. So these STEM events allow us to gather people in the communities also as a function of STEM and as a function of food systems, to be able to have that community support where people who may not have access to food equitably as somebody else who lives in the same town might be able to benefit from the conversation as well. So FoodMaster is just such an amazing program for the simple fact that it's so accessible and it accomplishes so much in such a little volume of materials. And it is so functional that you be able to take it and use it however it is that you needed to use it to be able to apply to the community of students and parents that you have within your school system and your town and your villages. Go ahead, Jess. I think that might be the last one. Is this your quote, Kristin? This is the quote you like, isn't it? I'll let you read it and talk about it because you get pretty fired up about this quote.
this is actually kind of one of the ways we think about STEAM, and kind of going back to this idea of what sets STEAM apart from other activities. And so many times when we think of hands-on learning, we put a project out and all the kids get the same answer. If we think about maybe some activities that we've done when we were younger, where it's, oh, we're going to build a car. Step one, put the wheels on the axle. Everybody gets the same thing. And it's the idea that this is really more of an open-ended approach, a more student-driven, creative approach. Because a project where everybody gets the same thing is a recipe. It's not a project. It doesn't allow for that exploration. Now, with that being said, there are some times when the recipe is needed. And so it's okay to bring the recipe in, or you can experiment with the recipe. So that was just how we like to close this out, because it's also another good food pun. But just a couple quick things to add, and some of the other ways we've been using the FoodMaster curriculum as we've dug into this. We have pulled it into an elementary camp and school program. I think, Jess, are you incorporating pieces of it into your high school or your high school and middle school camp? Do you want to talk a little bit about your exercise camp, the camp you're doing this summer, and how FoodMaster and nutrition is playing a role in that?
Absolutely. So I am doing what is called STEAM Sports, and it is the full integration of STEAM across the spectrum of athletics, because high school students, middle school students, a lot of them tell you that they're going to be a professional of some sort in an athletic field. And we know that the chances of that are actually quite slim, but that's not to dash their hopes. So the goal of the STEAM Sports Camp is to look at STEAM from a different and varying perspective. Instead of saying that, no, you're not going to become a professional athlete, it's what goes into actually creating an athlete. It goes to the nutrition side of things. So we're going to have one of our dietitian GAs come in and give a presentation on how food can sustain your system, and how it's so important for you to utilize food as a sustainability piece for your body to maintain health. And the kids will do a cooking activity with that, and they'll learn how to make easy, quick, nutrient-dense foods out of materials that they can commonly find in their pantries. And then we have the Huskies Belong, which is a grant-funded camp by Dr. Brian Dallas that has the students going, getting a variety of foods, and then playing almost a chopped game where they learn how to make things with random pantry staples, as well as things like hot dogs and stuff that tends to be a little bit less expensive as if you were a college student who is living on a budget. So we do a lot of this kind of work with our students in our summer camps. There's also tours that we offer where students go over to our campus and do the edible campus tours, which I was in the process of putting the link in there. I put in the podcast with Chef Brian Flowers, who is our campus, edible campus director. We use FoodMaster and food in just about everything we do here at NIU STEAM, which is one of the most exciting parts about our job. I threw in there a couple of blogs if you would like to check them out. There's one on ugly produce and using those for seed gathering. It talks about the debate between heirloom seeds and seeds that you get from produce at the grocery store. And it talks about how to maybe use some foods and kind of talk about the sustainability of our programs through the reuse of seeds and seed collection. And then the pumpkin activity, if you've never done pumpkin activity, it's where you take pumpkin, carve it, and then put it in a dish and let it grow itself again. I have firsthand experience. I grew sunflowers in my front yard. It was gorgeous. A squirrel came by, ate the sunflower, and pooped out a pumpkin seed. And then I had a pumpkin patch in my front yard that I was completely not expecting. So it kind of talks about the livelihood of pumpkins and how they're really fun to do and can grow in a variety of spaces. And then again, I put the podcast down there. We do podcast interviews with professors and educators, and this one specifically focuses on Chef Brian Flowers and his innovative way to look at food for the future in community gardens.
Thank you.
Jess, if you want to advance one more slide, it should have the links that they can check out if they want to check out more about FoodMaster.
The other piece I will add about FoodMaster, so if you get in and you start digging in, no matter what grade you're working with, it's outlined in a very similar way. So you'll see the first topic is always measurement. So building those math skills, looking at how do we measure, how do we work with these tools. Then you go into food safety. And from there, it's vegetables, fruits, milk and cheese, meat, poultry, fish, eggs, fats, grains, and then meal management. So each book, no matter what grade you go into, has these activities around these topics scaled to the grade level. However, one thing we will say is we tend to use the 3-5 book a lot and scale that up and down. It's a fantastic entry point, and is very, very scalable across wide grade bands. So if in your program you've got, some littles and some middle school students, you can target that 3 to 5 age and still kind of go up or down. Another way that we have used this is, as Chrissy said, is family salad nights. We're again partnering with one of our local food banks or our local community gardens. They supply the vegetables. We bring in the science of emulsification, where the students make their own salad dressing by learning how to mix and emulsify oil and water. They play around, or oil and what else do we have in there? Vinegar, mustard, various different, I'm like, all of those things. Parsley. And they start to mix up their own salad dressing, leaving some of the sugars and some of the some of the other ingredients out. But then they start to test and taste some vegetables, and some of the responses we've heard from the families are, I never thought my kid would try a pepper, or we had one family walk away with a whole flat of microgreens because they're like, these are amazing. And we talked about how you grow your own flat of microgreens, and they took them with and said, we're going to be adding them to a lot of our food moving forward. So these family nights where they can explore together using some of these really simple tools have been very successful. And how do we connect in with those other community partners that are servicing and supporting the same families we work with? So we're going to open it up to questions, comments. If there's anything else you'd like us to dig in deeper, we'd love to hear from you. What ideas has this inspired in you? Or are there any, oh my gosh, I'm going to try this as soon as I am with kids?
I'm just curious, Nebraska, we have a couple hydroponics things going on. So have you guys gotten into that world, or are you mostly outdoor gardens?
So Chrissy, do you want to talk a little bit about, so we recently received a grant, which has allowed us to explore and expand, and I'll let Chrissy talk a bit about what we've done in our green classroom.
We have both a aeroponic tower and a hydroponic tower. And we've actually used that in our lessons for the students. I had them each plant a couple of, because what it is you have a little cup and you get a sponge, you put the sponge in and you put in the seeds. And so they've been able to grow their own herbs in the aeroponic, and it holds 50 cups, and it's about, I don't know, about 4 feet tall. So it fits just in the corner of the classroom. And then the hydroponic tower, each level has its own, it's basically, it looks like a utility shelf. And then we've got plastic trays that are in each level, and each level has its own outdoor grow light that you could go ahead and change colors with. And that's allowed us to introduce kind of the experimental side of growing things, where students can use different colored lights, and they can control that. That's on a timer, so they can time how long they want the seeds or the plants to receive that light. So it gives them the opportunity to mess with variables that allows them to practice the engineering framework and NGSS standards and things like that. And that actually, we've grown microgreens in it. And some of the students took some of the microgreens with them. The rest that we didn't use went and fed our worms, because we have a little worm garden to put fruits and things in there that the students aren't eating and things like that. So we've been able to use both towers in curriculum that we're teaching to the middle schoolers in our after school program. Thank you for bringing that up. That was a really good point.
And I think, Lauren, to your point too, like you can buy the ready-made kits, but if you're at a lower price point, there are easy ways and cost-effective ways to step into some of the hydroponic gardening, or that's a great engineering challenge, is to have your students design their own hydroponic system using the requirements, the constraints, the budget, and it turns into an entire unit or lesson around food systems and new engineering ways that we're engineering the growing process. Other questions, thoughts, ideas? You come off mute, you can type it in.
One
the
of the
chat.
other things that goes along with the hydroponics too is that if you have them think about the sheer vastness of the population in the world and how it's growing and things like that, being able to talk about vertical gardening versus horizontal agriculture is also a great topic for them to think through and problem solve with problem-based learning, because ultimately we could run out of land to be able to produce the food that we need to feed the population that's on the earth. So talking to them about vertical gardening and resources and available resources is also a great thing to use the hydroponics and the aquaponics for.
Have you, in terms of hydroponics and aeroponics, which is aeroponics new to me, but have you been able to connect with any local businesses or industries that are doing that? And are there any in your area that, like I know here in South Side of Chicago, there is a hydroponic garden that sells, I think it's called City Greens, and they sell it in grocery stores. It's grown to that extent. So just wondering if there's anything like that near you and if the kids have been able to see any of that.
So great question, Kim. One of the benefits we have being on campus with an edible campus program is they've actually got, is it hydroponics or aeroponics, Chrissy? What's the ag pod? Is it hydroponics? Hydroponics, okay. So we, ComEd donated a container garden, like an old shipping container that they have converted into a hydroponics growing unit, because ComEd is trying to do research on what impact does that kind of growing system have on the energy grid. And so we've got the hydroponic garden that is here on campus that we can go look at. But there's also a company close to us that designs and is the engineering company for hydroponic and aeroponic gardens. So we're starting to look at connecting in with them. But if you don't have that around you, like looking at are there farm to table restaurants, especially in some of the urban centers, that are doing their own microgreen growing, and what kind of vertical gardens or hydroponics gardens do they have there for their restaurants? But yeah, finding those local connections of who's already solving some of these problems, or do you have a partner school? Many of the school districts now are starting to get hydroponic and aeroponic towers that they're using in their science programs, or they're starting to put into their food production, and see if maybe they want to partner or at least can come talk to you about how are they using it. Local universities might also have some of those that you can go explore.
I love the food to table idea,
Mhm.
especially connecting that with FoodMasters as you're talking about all these different activities. That's a great idea.
and talking to their chefs. Like, what is it that the chefs do to meal plan? How have they changed what they do in their restaurant? What's the cost benefit analysis of a lot of that? Like, again, once you start thinking about those connections and how FoodMaster can launch into a lot of these different conversations that are relevant to your students' lives, you start seeing connections everywhere. Other thoughts, ideas? One of the other tips that I will give as you're thinking about implementing this is thinking about how do you budget for the supplies? Because you are now, if you are working with food and it's not food you grow yourself, how does that impact your supply budget? And if you are within a grant that doesn't necessarily have food in their grant, you need to make sure you are justifying the food purchases as instructional supplies, because that is what they are. Even if you get to eat it in the end, you are still using it as an instructional supply. So thinking about what is the impact this has on your budget, because those are also, you can't do a once a year supply budget. Or supply run. You've got to be thinking about what does this do for your weekly or daily supply purchases? What do you do with the leftover food? Just Monday and Tuesday, there was a team of us out with one of our local schools making ice cream with our 1st through 3rd graders. So using the milk, the salt, doing the whole process, we overestimated the amount of milk we were going to use. So now we've got a lot of leftover milk. So luckily, we're going to be making ice cream today with our after school club. So it's like thinking about how do we make sure we're using our supply budgets in a good way so that we're not overspending. And so those are just all things you want to think about as you're going into what does implementation look like.
These are also great opportunities to partner with local businesses in the community, restaurants, food banks, and garden clubs, right? Social media has gardening clubs, has farmers, has all this stuff. You put the word out that you want to teach kids how to grow stuff, they will come forward with seeds and topsoil and all that kind of stuff. And then, you have these new connections and partnerships.
And they will talk careers. You might get tours. You might have funding partners. Also looking at local farm bureaus, if you've got farm bureaus or farm district folks around the areas. A lot of them also have education programs that they can come out and help support some of this as well.
And consider canning science also.
Absolutely.
So, mason jars get reused and donated. You can pick them up at thrift stores or Goodwill really, really cheap. If you have too many berries, make jelly.
Yeah. Yep. Again, if we go back to those STEAM essentials, we're building problem solvers. We're looking at planning skills. We're looking at organization. We're looking at collaboration. All of this is an intentional byproduct of these kinds of activities, when really the kids might just look at, we're doing cooking or we're doing a math lesson that is meal planning and coming up with nutritional analysis. And yes, Kim, it's that time we're all like, ooh, jelly, berries, salad, that sounds delicious right now. What other questions do you have, or is there any additional information we can provide before we send you on your way to get a snack?
I just wanted to say thank you. This has been an awesome session. This is great just to hear about these resources, and I agree. I think it's just fun to teach with food when you can. So, yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And Kim, thanks for connection. I think this is just an awesome thing to pull into the conference.
Great. Have a great day, everyone.
Jess and Chrissy are great resources. Feel free to reach out if you have any further questions.
Sounds awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.